So, Ron, a lot of times you and I have spoken about what a game changer it's been for you since you've had real time cash flow. That, before Finaloop, you kind of had a much harder time sort of gathering your numbers, having the data, and being able to actually use that on your day to day operations. So, I'd love to just hear a little bit from you about what your cash flow understanding and what your handle on all things cash flow sort of looked like before you joined Finaloop.
Yeah. So I think even before you even like go into like handling, I think the one biggest piece that I think people don't realize is cash flow is the true king in any business. No matter how great your unit economics look, gross margins, or even how much cash is in your bank, what really matters is how much cash is flowing through your business because that really helps you understand where you can invest, what you can expect, how to model your future, how to know what worked in the past, and overall, just understanding if you even have a viable business that can grow. So prior to Finaloop, I think the biggest problem that we had was we would understand cash flow in smaller segments. And we'd say, oh, well, today we made $35,000 and, here's what it looks like in terms of the impact it's making on our bank account. And we'll also see the daily transactions going out, so we'd have a good general sense. But the problem is until the end of the month and when our bookkeepers would finish everything after a couple of weeks, we never really understood the impact it was having on our business.
Mhm.
We couldn't make daily changes or weekly discussions or monthly impacts into here's what cash flow is doing for us and here are the opportunities it's opened up for us. When we switched to Finaloop, I think one of the coolest things we got to see is that we were able to finally start understanding on a daily basis here's the true cash flow we have, and here are the different things we can actually go and invest in, or here's where we can risk a little bit more, or here's a new product we can go and invest money into manufacturing because we understood our cash flow on a more daily basis. And on a weekly basis, we were able to implement bigger investments or even scale back on things that were definitely not going to work. Before, cash flow was a model that we kind of just studied on a monthly basis. Now we're able to study it on a daily and daily, often daily, but definitely weekly basis. And
Mhm.
it's helping us move much faster in where we should be doubling down on our growth.
Okay. And just out of curiosity, one of the things that I've noticed when I speak with a lot of different brands is that they're very focused on P&L and balance sheet. So they'll ask me, about Finaloop's P&L and L and balance sheet. What do they look like? Very few people ask me about cash flow. I think it's kind of like, the middle child of the financial report. It's forgotten a lot. And I'm curious, before you had real time cash flow, before you started using Finaloop, is it something that you noticed on a day to day basis that you didn't have? Is it a pain that you felt? It was sort of like you didn't really see it before, but then once you saw the after, you're like, how did I ever manage with it before?
Yeah, great question. I think when it comes to cash flow, initially when you're looking at it, it's just one of those things that's like it's oftentimes just categorized as, oh, cash going in, cash going out. That's your flow of cash. But what a lot of people don't realize is what impact that has in decision making, right? And I think initially I would say we didn't really understand the impact it can have until we were able to be powered with seeing cash flow statements on a more regular basis. And we're like, wait, knowing what we know now, we can actually do those things, some initiatives we had planned way earlier, or we can actually do things way differently. Like, for example, one of the most, I think, common examples is us needing to scale on ad spend. Okay.
Hmm.
When we were used to just base it off of our P&L at the end of the month, we'd say, okay, spend is this percentage of revenue, and now next month maybe we can invest a little bit more, a little bit less, depending on our net margin, and that would be fine. But when you're looking at cash flow basis, you're able to say, hey, we spent $50,000 this week and we generated $200,000 in cash flow, right? Maybe next week we can spend 65,000 and see if there's incremental ad spend or any, but you don't make that decision on a P&L basis. You make it on a cash flow basis. And so we're able to take a lot of different things that we want to do that we would usually do maybe once a month or reviewing it post a month on a much more rigorous basis. So I don't think we really understood the value of a cash flow statement until we got to see it on a much more regular real time basis.
Is one of the key ways that I've seen this visibility into cash flow really impact someone's brand is how it impacts their cash conversion cycle. And you know, so what is cash conversion cycle? First of all, for people who don't know, it's the speed at which you can turn your inventory into cash. So, on the cash conversion cycle, I think that you are one of the few brands that we've seen successfully manage to create a negative cash conversion cycle, where essentially your suppliers and your vendors are essentially lending you money to be able to fund all of the fund the actual operations and fund your purchases of the inventory. So, I'd love to just hear a little bit from you about how you have managed to create that negative cash conversion cycle, and what you've been able to do with that since you created it.
Yeah, great question. So one of the things, like you mentioned, creating a negative cash conversion cycle basically gives you the ability to not have to pay out money before for things like inventory before you actually sell through it and create cash to pay use new cash to pay that off. So for us, one of the things I think where it starts with, right, is understanding your business and understanding how much time you need to pay something off, right? You start to work backwards. So let's say when we have new inventory coming in, we realize that it takes 30 days to make it. Okay, so from when you order it, it takes 30 to 45 days to make it. Then from there, it comes to our warehouse, give it another week or 2 weeks of testing and stuff like that. So total, it takes about 8 weeks for us to place our order and get the inventory and start selling. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What I want to do is I want to make sure that when my payment is due, okay, so I go to my vendor, my manufacturer, and say, hey, I need X amount of net terms, and I'm going to use this payment method that's going to give me X amount of extra days to pay it off, right? And basically, I want to create it so that I have an extra 4 to 8 weeks before the payment is due for that inventory that took 8 weeks to make, okay? Because in that 4 to 8 weeks, I can start selling that inventory that finished and create new cash to pay off the inventory instead of using existing cash. And that's converting cash in a negative format because you're actually using cash that wasn't even really produced yet, right? That's why it's called negative cash.
Mm-hmm.
It's cash that isn't there. So for us, we're using payment methods, negotiating terms, and figuring out ways to accelerate marketing so that we can generate negative cash to pay off anything that's due for the inventory that's helping us create that negative cash.
Okay, so I think if you can speak to to yourself right when you started everything for Obvi, right when the things were just starting up and you were looking into kind of getting your account set up, getting your finances set up, what is something you would tell the Ron back then? What's something you kind of wish you knew then that would have given you the visibility or given you more information to be able to make better decisions from the get-go?
Yeah, I think there's a few things, right? One, and I think I'll start with the main big thing is not no relying on somebody to tell you what your numbers are, and that too very infrequently, right? We call it once a month for the previous month. I think I rely too much on what other people told me to assess my business instead of actually assessing my business my way. Um, if you think about it, all of the things we do in our business, managing inventory, it's a daily task. Managing customer service, it's a daily task. Managing our marketing ad spend, it's a daily, hourly task,
Mm-hmm.
right? All these tasks are daily. However, when it came to analyzing the health of our business and financial health, we did that once a month. And it kind of boggles my mind where that's the most important piece, and we did that the most amount of infrequent times. So I would have told myself, I think my future self, that when it came to starting your business, your finances and your business economics and your unit economics and numbers need to be almost looked at daily as well, even though they're not changing much. But you
Mm-hmm.
need to be kind of on top of that as much as you are on top of marketing and inventory and all the other parts of your business.
Yeah, and by the way, that's really, huge, especially coming from you, because you have that accounting background, right? You before Avi, I don't know if a lot of people know this about you, but you have that audit background where, for you specifically, you kind of knew certain things to look for and be aware of going into it. But there are a lot of brand founders who kind of go in really not knowing much about finances. And when they're speaking to someone that they kind of see as an advisor, a bookkeeper, someone who sort of spends their time dealing with numbers, and they're telling them, well, this is the way it's done. You get your numbers earliest 2 weeks after the month is over. That's just the limitation of the business. There's nothing else for them to know in terms of, is this the right way to do it? Is this the only way to do it? They kind of, I think they're just very happy to sort of pass that over. No one wants to deal with bookkeeping. No one wants to deal with accounting. So it's just one of those things people are happy to be like, okay, I have a couple
Yep.
more weeks until I get the numbers. And in the meantime, I'll just, take some guesstimates and hope for the best. Um,
Right.
but I think it's a huge blind spot that people have going in, because they just don't realize that there are better ways to do this, and there are better decisions that they can make for their business when they actually have those numbers.
I couldn't agree more. And I think it's not even just having those numbers, it's actually empowering yourself with being able to say, I'm going to look at these numbers in real time and be able to start talking about my company way more pragmatically, instead of just like, hey, here's my company and here's what I think it's doing. I
Mhm.
see too many founders, when you ask them like a detailed question, they just have to like they almost seem like they're scrambling a little bit, because they're like, oh, I got to check that, or I don't really look at that. And I think we should not be okay with an excuse like, I don't really know that. You have to know your numbers more than you know any other part of your business. And I think especially us, using Finaloop as just being in. I think the biggest part of Finaloop is it empowers you more than anything, right? It's not like it's spitting out new numbers or something different than some other tool. It's actually the ability to empower you because it's in real time.
I think that was the first time I ever got emotional talking about about bookkeeping. But I love the way you put it. It does empower you.
Yeah.
And I think that just as a last point, one of the things that I also see along those same lines that a lot of founders do is, especially when it comes to cash flow, it's one of those things that they kind of see as inevitable. When it comes to their P&L, they can kind of look in hindsight and learn lessons from it, and then, okay, so now going forward, I'll do this, or we need to increase our revenue, we need to decrease these expenses. When it comes to cash flow, I think people kind of just see it as something it's inevitable. So it's going to happen a certain way. So it doesn't help for me to look at what's going to be happening right now, because that it's just the way it is. But I think people, instead of looking at it like, you're watching a car in a race, that whatever's going to happen is going to happen, like, you're actually driving that car. So if you know that a turn is happening, you know that something's going to happen where you can crash and burn. It's your job to steer the car away from there. It's your job to know what's going to be happening, and don't just close your eyes and say, okay, well, that's it. If I'm running out of cash, I'm running out of cash. Like, this is
Well
where
said.
your job as a founder comes in, where you can really steer that car and say, okay, there's another path I can take.
Right. Very, very well said. Couldn't explain that better, analogy wise.